Hi, my name is Genevieve, and today me and my groupmate Aisha Ariana will be presenting on managing boundaries as a school counselor in Malaysia. So to start off, for introduction, what is managing boundaries? So counseling is a process in which one person will assist another in better understanding and discussing problem that he or she is experiencing. So, boundaries are an important framework for practicing ethical client therapist relationships, both within and outside the therapy room. Maintaining boundaries aids in the preservation of the therapeutic relationships, integrity, as well as the public's confidence in therapists and clinicians. School counselors in Malaysia may not teach, but they are an important aspect to assist and guide students in their mental well-being. According to the Education Ministry, there are only less than 4,000 registered counselors in schools around Malaysia. Another article published by The Star in 2019 said students would often burst out in tears or even zone out in class, and teachers wouldn't even know what to do because of the lack of counselors. Students as well as everyone around the world are in a position of uncertainty. And with that, their mental health is at stake too. And the lack of awareness on mental health, as well as the lack of counselors in school, is very worrying. The topic mental health is still a taboo in Malaysia, hence the lack of importance that is given. And with that comes the counselors who do not understand their boundaries between students and themselves. So, what's the issue? Before I go over the issue, here's the stats from 2016 to 2021 of registered counselors in Malaysia. As you can tell, there's not much. The estimated ratio is that for one counselor, it's 3,495 individuals. So going over the current issues, what is the issue? The first is confidentiality and its limits. One of the most significant issues with school counseling session is that counselors are required to disclose personal information to their parents, particularly when the patient is depressed or at risk of self-harm. So where's the issue in this? In Malaysia, counselors have a reputation of oversharing students' issue with their colleagues, which violates confidentiality. And as a result, Malaysian students hate the notion of counseling or therapy because they've never had a very meaningful experience. The second is differences in cultural values and traditions. Malaysia is a multiracial nation, which means that there are many students of numerous races and faith that are present at schools. So the issue is that in Malaysia, especially in schools, teachers or counselors tend to talk about religion when counseling students, which is highly inappropriate because counselors should never enforce or overshare on their personal cultural beliefs and should always maintain a professional session that focuses only on their students' mental well-being. The third issue and the last issue that I'll be covering today is keeping a professional distance. In Malaysian schools, it is common for students to also develop a friendship-like relationship with teachers or counselors, which is highly inappropriate. Because of this, students might actually be overly dependent on their counselors, and the school counselors too will go out of line. So what do I mean by that? I mean that students and teachers would probably, for example, have a conversation or a text message outside school time or outside counseling session, which is very inappropriate. School counselors' relationship with the students should always remain within the context of counselors' professional abilities. So that is the current issues, and I will pass the presentation to Aisha. Thank you.
Thank you, Genevieve. My name is Aisha Ariana, and I will be continuing our discussion. So let's discuss. Jen has mentioned a few of the current issues with Malaysian Malaysian school counselors, and one of the controversy is that they have a multifaceted role. So meaning that they are not only the counselor, but they could be a counselor and a teacher, or a counselor and an administrator. So like Jan mentioned, because of these multiple roles, some counselors tend to overshare or disclose personal details regarding the client, which is a student, to maybe other teachers or a parent. So when, of course, if it's something that would harm others or harm themselves, then we should disclose it to their parents. But for example, like small details, or maybe things that other people shouldn't even know. So, and then that's when a rumor starts in school between among the teachers, and all of this results to students feeling that their sessions are not worth it, and the counselor is untrustworthy. So this also actually somewhat makes awareness and also acceptance of mental health topics in among students a little bit more difficult. It's because they have this perception of school counselors are they don't keep your secret, and if you see a counselor, that means you're mentally ill, so yeah. So moving on to the ethical code, according to Nurul Hashima and Wan Marzuki, counselors often commit ethical violations due to their ethical dilemmas or contradictions in their careers. So Francis and Dagger confirms that there is a discrepancy between personal and ethical principles when practicing counseling. So we will dive into ethical code after this. And lastly, the legal implications. Failure to comply with the code of ethics will result in suspension of counselor's license. So moving on. So the multifaceted roles of counselors. So why does this happen? School counselors, they might have lack of understanding about school counseling. So when they don't know what to do because of their multiple roles, and also having to focus on the students' mental well-being, it is due to role ambiguity. So meaning that the school or our government do not set specific job descriptions for these counselors, meaning that if you're a counselor, you shouldn't be doing other tasks, for example. So yeah, with the multiple roles, and this results in an ineffective performance. So so at the end of the day, yes, students come and see counselors and stuff, but it doesn't really help them. So why does this happen? Like I mentioned, lack of distinct description of counselors' work, insufficient professional preparations, limited budget and facilities. As you know, our government schools, they do have limited budget and facilities within the school compound. So to assist and help students, they might need extra assistance. And students' misconception, like I mentioned, teacher prejudice towards counselors. Some teacher actually don't really think that a school counselor is necessary or is needed in the school environment. And lastly, concurrent position as a teacher counselor must balance the stress of heavy workload. So meaning if you're a teacher, you have you need to take care of your subject schedule, and accounts. As a counselor, you also have your documentations to do, and many of these issues are influenced by high school counselors' practice being unclear. So next would be, okay, so the ethical code. There are a few ethical codes that we will be discussing. The first one would be confidentiality, privilege, communication, and privacy. According to the codes of ethics, this section addresses significance of trust and confidentiality in the helping relationship. So this section provides insights into how counselors are obligated to ensure the client's rights. So there is exception to any harm and danger towards the client or other people, and so counselors must also disclose confidentiality limits and also the legal requirements regarding to that. And of course, counselors are not allowed to release any information about the client with others, especially subordinates and third parties who do not really need the information about your client. The counselor will also have to explain and disclose if they are having a group and family counseling, and disabled clients who give informed consent, and counseling records, research, training, and consultation. So the counselor must provide client with all of this information before starting their treatment or their sessions. So next would be the professional responsibility, section C. So this section mentions that counselors' responsibility to work in non-discriminatory context, open and truthful communication, and adherence to the code of ethics. So counselor must be familiar with the ethics code and also understand, so that they can apply the rules and the legislations as well. So they are also liable for their clinical competencies, advertising and customer acquisition, professional credentials, civic obligations, and responsibilities to other practitioners. So going back to what Jen mentioned in the current issue slide, so the counselor need to be professional in during their sessions. So meaning if they have multiple roles, and as a teacher or as a friend or as a teacher who is close to that student, well, it is an advantage, but they need to be able to set the boundary, and it will also affect how the counselor interprets the situation or the session. So moving on. So section D talks about relationship with other professionals. It explains counselor interactions with co-workers, employees, and subordinates. So it emphasizes on positive relationships, which includes teamwork, trust building, deciding professional responsibilities and ethics, employer policies, negative activities, and so on. So it also emphasizes on consulting, which involve consultant competency, priorities, and informed consent. So meaning with all of this, counselors should also know their boundaries with their co-workers and other professionals. So meaning if a certain information of the client shouldn't be disclosed, so they should know, they should be aware of that, have a positive relationship with other professionals. So lastly, the legal implications. So if you fail to comply to the code of ethics, your license will be suspended, and also dismissal from university's counseling program. This is from Elliot and the rest. And So if a licensed counselor refuses to practice accordingly to the code of ethics, when they're carrying out their professional duties, they can be held civilly liable. That is, the counselor committed a wrong against a person. So there are 4 conditions for a counselor to be held liable for tort malpractice. So number 1 is a duty is owed to client by the counselor. Number 2, breach of duty by the counselor. Number 3, presence of causal link between the breach and the client's injury. And lastly, client suffers damage or injury. So a duty is owed to client by the counselor, meaning maybe the client has paid the full amount, but you have not given maybe 1 or 2 sessions that the client paid for. Breach of duty by the counselor, meaning they breach any of the codes of ethics. The way they practice is against the code of ethics. So the next one would be presence of causal link between the breach and the client's injury. So this is when the counselor is doing something wrong and it leads to the client's injury. And lastly, client suffers damage or injury. This is direct effect. So meaning maybe the counselor did not disclose any certain information that the client could be harmful, or the client could be harmful to themselves and also to others. So that is all from me. Thank you.
To summarize this presentation, Malaysia's Education Ministry need to prioritize and pay more attention to students' mental well-being, as well as emphasize the importance of mental health in schools in order to ensure that it is not a stigma, but rather an important topic to discuss. Furthermore, it is important for counselors to do their job effectively, focusing only on the mental well-being of students and not straying from their responsibilities as licensed counselors. And that is all for our presentation today. Thank you.